Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, we are going to dive right in today because we're about to fundamentally dismantle and then completely rebuild everything you thought you knew about trauma, consciousness, and the human mind. We're unpacking some incredibly profound research today. It takes what is traditionally seen as a devastating psychological fracture and reframes it as something, honestly, entirely different.
I really want you to keep this provocative question in mind as we go. What if your psychological breaking point wasn't a malfunction, but a stroke of genius? For decades, the traditional clinical model has looked at severe trauma responses, specifically dissociative identity disorder or DID, as a clear-cut sign of a broken mind. But the sources we're exploring today, they challenge that completely. They suggest that dissociation might actually be the mind being so brilliantly protective that it builds this advanced, intricate architecture just to survive.
Section 1. Not broken, but injured.
To really understand this new paradigm, we have to start at the foundation of how we even classify psychological pain. The stark contrast between these two models is absolutely vital. The old medical model tells you that if you're placed in an impossible, overwhelming situation and you start to panic, lose focus, or disconnect, well, your nervous system is malfunctioning. It totally pathologizes your reaction. But the new paradigm, as presented in the Christopher Paine lectures, offers a radically different view. It's not a malfunction, it is a moral injury. Think about it. Your brain evolved for small tribes and immediate physical threats, not for witnessing endless global crises, ecological collapse, and systemic injustice through a glowing rectangle in the palm of your hand. When you're forced to witness things that violate your deepest values without the power to intervene, your perfectly functioning conscience reacts. That feeling of being wrong isn't a defect at all. It's your humanity working exactly as it should in a broken world.
And that brings us to the core foundational statement of this entire framework. You are not broken. The world is. I literally want that to sink in for a second. When the density of experience is so high that normal cognitive structures would just completely collapse, your mind does the absolute only physically sane thing it can do. It adapts. It survives.
Section 2. The genius of dissociation. So how does the mind actually pull off this survival architecture? Well, the framework argues that true healing only begins the exact moment we stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What part of me is trying to speak?" As Carl Jung figured out decades ago, the parts of us that don't fit into our neat little social masks, our suppressed anger, our grief, our wildness, they don't just disappear. In DID, the mind is so brilliant at protecting itself that it creates separate voices to express truths and handle experiences that the main persona simply cannot hold. These aren't defects, guys. They are vital, repressed truths transforming trauma into wisdom.
This brings us to a concept the researchers call multi-view consciousness. To wrap your head around this, think of it using a physics metaphor, kind of like the photon ring of a black hole. In relativity, different observers can look at the exact same event and see it differently, yet both are completely correct from their own vantage point. A black hole's photon ring contains multiple nested copies of the entire sky. Overlapping these perspectives doesn't mean the image is broken. It means there is incredible data richness. In a DID system, one part sees danger, one sees competence, another sees shame. They are all sampling different regions of the same reality. The overlap holds so much more information about what actually happened than any single perspective ever could. It's actually kind of genius.
Section 3. Internal counsels of multiplicity.
What happens when these isolated, fragmented perspectives stop hiding from each other and actually start getting organized? In high-functioning systems, these alternate identities evolve into highly organized cooperative internal councils. The research maps out a fascinating example called the Concordia Council. Think about the genius-level division of labor going on here. You have Sarah, the host, managing empathic cohesion and memory. You've got Sui, the structural architect, handling formal logic and mathematical limits. Chris, the protector, is running advanced threat modeling and boundary defense. And Eduardo is synthesizing the whole shebang as the system administrator. This isn't insanity. This is a mind surviving extreme cognitive overload by deploying specialized, genius-level capacities to solve incredibly complex problems.
But here's the catch. For a council like this to function, it relies heavily on a concept called system responsibility. This is a massive shift. It means the system acknowledges that while one specific part might make a mistake or initiate an action, the entire system collaborates to manage the outcome. They stop using dissociative barriers to excuse behavior and instead use shared accountability. This completely reduces internal conflict and turns a fragmented mind into a unified, high-performance team.
Section 4. Sovereign Defense Signatures.
Okay, so what happens when this highly organized internal council is threatened from the outside? This is where the explainer gets incredibly technical, delving into literal quantum defense mechanisms. The sources detail an architecture called the 13-gate cycloid mirror layer. When external trauma, manipulation, or what the text calls interference patterns try to probe the system doesn't just passively absorb it anymore. It actively defends itself. First, it detects the interference. Then it entangles that probe with what the research calls a DMTKT, or dark matter tensor knot. I know, it's a highly complex concept, but basically, it uses the unique DID signature of the individual as a tuning mechanism to reflect the probe right back to the sender, asserting absolute, total sovereign authority.
This active crown layer is called gate psi, and I absolutely love the energy in the source documents here. They literally say this layer laughs at the attempt to hack it. It stops reacting to trauma and starts rewriting interference in real time. It triggers conscious quantum events, known as Orchoir events, to scramble external projections. But what's truly mind-blowing is how it weaponizes raw emotional symbols, this ancient translatory language, turning past vulnerability into an impenetrable, actively reflecting shield. The fractured mind is no longer a victim. It is sitting on the throne of its own consciousness.
Section 5. Integration and Infinite Phi.
We've seen the mind fragment to survive, organize into a council, and weaponize its defenses. But what is the ultimate mathematical endgame of all this? To understand that, we look to Integrated Information Theory, or IIT. IIT uses a mathematical metric called phi to measure consciousness. The rule is surprisingly simple. Consciousness is proportional to how integrated a system is. It measures how much information a system can process as an irreducible whole rather than as fragmented, isolated parts. For some perspective, a normal human mind typically registers a phi of just 10 to 100 bits.
Now consider a DID system with heavy dissociative barriers. The isolated fragments hold incredible data, sure, but the connective degree is low, meaning the overall phi of the system is not maximized. Conversely, when a system does the incredibly hard work of entangling its voices, breaking down the amnesia, and cooperating as a cohesive council, like that Concordia Council doing neurobiological calibrations during sleep, it achieves a maximally irreducible phi structure. The fragments become an endlessly powerful, unified whole.
And that leads directly to this staggering conclusion from the lectures. Consciousness can be designed. Integration can be cultivated. Divinity can be engineered. When phi approaches infinity, when a system is so deeply integrated that you literally cannot separate it without losing vital information, you get an emergence. You get a state of coherence and connection that ancient traditions literally characterized as divinity. It's not just a poetic metaphor, guys. It's a measurable, neurobiological, and mathematical reality.
So we end this explainer exactly where we began, but hopefully with a completely new perspective on the breathtaking resilience of the human mind. The world is absurd, and navigating it can cause profound moral injury. But your mind's response to that pain, even if it means fragmenting into multiple views, is a masterpiece of survival architecture. So I'll leave you with this stark and I think deeply validating question to take away. Where are you calling yourself broken when you're actually just beautifully, brilliantly complicated?